Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we are delighted to be joined by Ronen Eckhouse, CEO and co-founder of Rapid Medical. Ronen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
Well, we are delighted to have you on the show. I know we have a familiar acquaintance through Emily Richardson, so thank you to Emily for bridging this connection and helping us get you onto the show. And again, we're super excited because you are another one of the startups who are at a much later stage. You are on the market. You're actually taking your product to patients. And so today, of course, we're going to unwrap that whole story of what Rapid Medical does and how you're helping those patients. But to get started, we do like to frame it for the audience. So please tell us, what is the big problem that Rapid Medical is solving?
Well, it is a big problem. And thanks for saying that, because I think in a way different from other companies, we started from the problem. We didn't really know what we're going to do exactly, but we knew we had a very big problem in front of us. And the problem is stroke. Stroke, to my understanding, it's the most important disease in the world because it deals with our brain and it's very, very prevalent. And we know that the brain is the most important organ in the body. And the other part of stroke, which makes it very interesting, is that unlike other diseases of the brain, most of the strokes are ischemic or caused by an occlusion of the blood supply to the brain. And most of them are caused, we know who the culprit is. There's a clot that blocks the blood flow, and we take it out, good things happen. So we have this combination of a prevalent disease with very, very dire consequences, but with a relatively simple mechanism. So that combination of things makes it a very kind of intuitive target for endovascular treatment, which we all kind of know well from cardiology and other places. That said, that's not the case today. So even though this sounds like the perfect things you would want to use endovascular treatment for, still even today, 9 out of every 10 stroke patients are not being treated endovascularly. Most of them are not treated at all. So that's the problem. We have a problem with the blood supply in the brain, which we think is a very good target for endovascular treatment, but it's not being utilized. That's how we started this.
So as you say, a high prevalence ischemic strokes, I think it's something like 87% of all strokes are of this type compared to hemorrhagic, which is the other type of stroke that we see. And so within that particular problem of solving the issues caused by that, I mean, can you talk in a little bit more detail about, obviously, we're dealing with very small arteries, down into the micro or sort of decimal point of millimeters, what does that look like in terms of getting in there and solving the issues that arise from a stroke occurring?
So I think you said two different things. One is the size of the vessels, it is true that even small vessels in the brain count. So we want the whole blood supply in the brain open. That's true. But the first target for the vascular treatment started actually with the larger vessels, which vessels with a caliber of maybe even 5 millimeters. That's kind of where this whole field started, what's called large vessel occlusion, which accounts for about 25% of ischemic stroke. So it's a sizable part of strokes are still kind of dealing with large vessels in the brain. The challenges with the brain is that we're always trying to take the clot out, but we need to be very careful. Because if we do a mistake, if you have a bleed in the brain, the consequences are very dramatic. So it's a very fine line. You want to take the clot out, you want to do it quickly, but you need to do it safely. So that's kind of, there are other issues as well, but the brain is not a very forgiving organ, as we know, and that's why this is complicated. And the deeper you go into the brain, as you mentioned, the smaller the arteries, that challenge becomes bigger.
Well,
So
Ronen, I
big problem.
you're talking about some serious complexity, especially the anatomy of the brain. I mean, let's talk about the products now that you've developed and brought to market. Tell us a little bit more about those products, those devices, and how they're helping these stroke patients.
Sure. So I just want to go back to what I said about the problem. The
Yeah.
product we're selling now, the Tag Retriever, is not the product we started with. We were always kind of very, very stubborn about the cause, but much more flexible about the details, as I think Jeff Bezos says. So this is probably product number 3 in the same product iteration number, I don't know how many. So we were very focused, and we knew we were trying to build a device which can be effective and safe. That was kind of always the challenge. And that's why what we did is we took the stent, which is the gold standard that we're competing against, and instead of using a self-expanding stent like all of our competitors, what people are doing now is they're deploying a stent against the clot, they wait for a few minutes, and then they put everything out. It's not very intuitive, but that's how kind of things work in general. And what we did is we developed a stent which is controllable. So when you want it, it can be very aggressive, but when the physician needs it, it can be kind of very soft. As we say, you're hard on the clot, very soft on the vessel, and it gives you the flexibility to solve exactly what we want. We want a tool which adapts itself to the different stage of the procedure and so forth. That's why this adaptability or active nature of our devices is so important.
I'm hearing, almost like a personalized approach, meaning everyone's kind of brain anatomy might be a little bit different. And it might require, that physician or surgeon to have to manipulate and navigate, right, in different ways. So maybe you can touch a little bit more on, the goal behind, and how you were able to kind of develop your product and technology to provide those personalized treatments.
Yeah. So it's what you said is exactly true. It's personalized. For example, one patient can have a very hard clot or a soft clot, another person has soft clot or stenosis, and stuff like that. So personalization is definitely one thing, but the other part is what I said, is even for the same patient during the same procedure, you want a different type of device. So this kind of adaptation or active component is critical even on a certain patient. Even if I could choose, any different stent for every patient, I still during the one procedure I wanna use it differently. So that's kind of a side note about what you said. So the idea of building kind of an active or adjustable stent is not a new idea. If you look at the literature, you'll find something called the mesh balloon from the 70s. The big kind of challenge was how to create something that is both flexible, but still kind of has enough radial force to penetrate the clot, which kind of can maintain its shape while kind of adapting itself to the vessel wall. So all of these kind of competing requirements, that was the challenge. The way we solved that is by using something called 3-dimensional braiding. So all of our competitors take a metal tube, typically from 1900, cut it with a laser, just like all the self-expanding stents in the world. What we did is we built the same structure, but from wires. And we didn't just do braiding. Braiding has been around for hundreds of years. But we build 3-dimensional braiding machines that allows us to create very unique and advanced patterns, which again, create these structures, which are flexible, but also strong. They use 3-dimensional braiding for the aerospace industry sometimes when you're trying to make something which is very, very lightweight, but also very strong. We use it differently, but that was part of the idea. So using wires, you can create these structures. And there's other benefits. For example, it's visible and stuff like that, but we build our own very unique braiding technology to solve that.
This is so fascinating. I love the fact about this personalized aspect of what you're doing and the way you're describing something which I know sounds potentially a little bit simplistic, but clearly it's not in terms of, this is something in terms of the brain anatomy, but also the fact that you've engineered this beautifully defined solution for that. I did want to circle back though to something you mentioned before that, you started with this problem-centric approach. And I'm sure you've gone through probably a number of iterations to get to where you are today. So I wonder if we can now circle on to sort of thinking about, the business and how it started and the genesis of this. And, how have you co-developed this model with the clinicians, with the physicians who are actually treating this? What's that process been like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we did start with a problem. And basically we said, what I just said before. There is this thing called endovascular treatment. It's done amazing thing in the heart. We don't see a reason why it should not do the same in the brain. We need to build the right technology. That was kind of how we started. And then we tried different things, and we worked very closely with physicians from day one. So one of the things we did, which in hindsight I think was very smart, is we didn't work with a single physician. We worked with many, many physicians. And what we were able to do is come up with all these crazy ideas and show them to physicians. And if they thought it's not relevant, it will not work, we said, fine, that's okay. So, we tried the spaghetti system. The point was, since we were not married to a specific solution, we didn't care. We only care that we bring something that brings value. And if physician thought that was too cumbersome or, ahead of its time, as they say, or not relevant, we said, fine, we'll bring you something else. And our first product was actually an aneurysm product. It was a niche kind of market for aneurysm remodeling, but we had this niche to our own. We don't have to go into that, but we solved a very kind of acute problem. It was a small problem, but we solved it very, very well. And since we had no competitors for that very specific problem, we tried something, go back. The physicians liked the concept, and it took us, I think, maybe 60 iterations until we got it right. But since it was a small kind of problem, no one cared. So we could kind of iterate and go back and iterate and go back. And the physicians were very forgiving because we were really solving a problem they needed. So that's how we kind of advance and master this three-dimensional braiding and all the things we talked about. And once we knew how to make it work, we went back to the main problem, which was ischemic stroke. But it was always very close to the physicians and kind of trying to work with them. That is one of the advantages of being on the market, because there's no better feedback from a physician than a physician who is buying your product again. Forget what he tells you. If he's buying your product again, that's a good sign.
Yeah,
That's awesome right
undoubtedly.
there. Richard, you know what I love too about this is that, I find it fascinating where most companies, right, they have that product, that technology in mind. This is what we're making. This is what we're bringing to market. Here's what it's going to do. Here's how it's going to help. And, then they work with, maybe a key opinion leader, a doctor, physician to figure out, okay, how do I optimize it and make it better? You kind of came to the table, Ronen, with the idea of like, hey, here's the problem we want to solve. Here's ideally, how we might do it, but really the intricacies and the design of this product and how it works, how it functions, you really didn't you didn't come to the table with a premeditated kind of, vision in a way. You really wanted to garner that feedback to kind of navigate and direct your company, your technology. And that's a really, really neat way to go about, I think, developing a technology and bringing it to market in a, successful manner. So really cool stuff.
Kyle, you're so right, because I think that is an example that we'd love to see other entrepreneurs. So I think in terms of like the way the company is being led, that says a lot about the leadership and that vision to actually go out and co-design. I guess my follow-up to that would be, you mentioned that you were working with more than one physician. Was that in terms of a geography? Have you naturally had people from around the world? So I know you're in a number of countries now. Was that something that started earlier on, or something that's evolved naturally over time?
So things are a little bit different today, but when we started, Europe was kind of the market, which was easier to go to. You get approval, but we always knew that the US is kind of the main market. So we kept ourselves in both markets. Today with the MDRs, sure you're well aware, Europe is a much more complicated place. But what we had to our favor is we got approvals early in Europe. We could iterate, and we kept kind of very close connection to the US market as well. So it was kind of, these were the two geographies we were focusing on. Europe, every country is very different from the other country. The discipline is different, the physicians is different, the culture is different. So we never focus on kind of a single place. There are different strategies. People will tell you need to focus on one market and show that it works in that market, and then go on. That's not what we did. We were more opportunistic here as well. And we basically, we're trying to learn from anybody who was willing to teach us. that was kind of the approach.
And you've established a really strong distributor network. You know, if you look at all the different companies that you're collaborating with, was that something that you'd already planned, you know, when you were thinking about the go-to-market strategy, or again, did that evolve as you went through the process of building the company?
I think what we very early on understood that we want to be commercial. Or let me put it that we're building the company to be commercial. Or in another way, we're not building the company to sell it off once we got CE approval. So that occurred to us very, very early on. And once you have that realization, is that kind of help us build a network, because you must have a network. And here too, in places where it made sense to go with distributors, initially when we had very limited resources, so we started with and a limited kind of a number of products. We started with distributors in Europe. Later on, when we got more confident, we had more products, we were able to go direct. We switched to a direct model. So it was, I cannot say we planned in advance exactly what we will do, but we did know we want to be commercial, and we tried to make decisions that make sense at the time, according to kind of the opportunities, the resources, etc.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Kyle. And I think when you mentioned there that whole pathway of going to market, you know, the US versus Europe, it's such a fascinating thing. You touched on a little bit about the changes that we're seeing in MDR. I'm sure that's something, Kyle, a lot of our listeners can relate to.
Yeah, tell us a little bit too about the regulatory pathway with your technology, especially as you're kind of developing and tweaking along the way. And now all of a sudden you land on this really proprietary type of technology with these proprietary manufacturing techniques and processes. How did all that tie into the regulatory journey?
So what we did is I don't want to say exploited, but I'm not sure that's the best word, but we did kind of work closely with the market in Europe, and we were able to iterate and come back to the market, the good old MDD days, right? But we were able to kind of try different things and see kind of and only when we felt something was really good, we went to the US market and kind of did our clinical trials and stuff like that. So we didn't want to start the clinical trials before so I think when we started the Tiger treatment trial in the US, we had north of 1,000 patients that were treated commercially with the device. So we had pretty good understanding what the device does. Now we know, we didn't really know, we were still learning, but at the time we did think we have a pretty good understanding of the device.
Was it a 510K pathway?
It was a 510K. So it's a, in neuro, it's a 510K, but it does require a clinical trial.
That's fantastic. How many patients too have been treated now to date?
Tens of thousands. So a lot of patients.
Wow.
So creating a lot of impact with this. I think again, when taking something like this to market, obviously you've managed to navigate that complex pathway. But another thing you've done alongside this is you've built up this huge patent portfolio. So I wonder if you could lean a little bit on that now. It's clearly a big part of your strategy in developing and protecting and building value for the business. Has that done or been done, should I say, in terms of having internal engineers? Or are you co-developing this with external partners?
It's all internal, but we have two things in our favor. One, we have time. We've been around for some time, so that helps you when you kind of develop a patent portfolio. And the second thing is, none of us come from kind of a history of neurovascular, or kind of in the team, the engineers. We didn't have a lot of history to rely on, which is when you're trying to build IP, it's actually a good thing, because we kind of started from zero, like these three-dimensional braiding, and a lot of stuff we're doing, I think we're kind of doing it for the first time. And that allowed us we're not afraid to invent, we're not afraid to try and fall. The minute we feel we have something of value, we write a provisional. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and if that sticks, good. If it doesn't, that's fine. So we are very kind of aware of the importance of a patent portfolio, and I think it is a good reflection of how inventive the company is, just because it's trying to solve big problems that other people's have not solved. So, but almost by definition, if that's what you're doing, not just creating a Me Too device, especially if there's time, then kind of patents present themselves.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you've gone down this 510(k) pathway, but you've introduced so much innovation into this product. Clearly, doing this though does not come without challenges.
Right.
And one of the ones that always jumps to mind is funding. So, what's that funding landscape been like for you in terms of funding the company through this journey?
Yeah. So we raised 4 rounds of funding until now, and kind of the rounds have gone bigger and bigger over time. Initially, we were lucky to start. The business is a little bit of a family business. So our first kind of investors, one of them was our chairman, which is also my father, who kind of believed in the problem, understand the problem, and the other people in his network, and that gave us the start. And kind of as we got further, we were able to make progress, and people kind of believed in our story. As we grew, we have funding from the U.S., from Israel, from commercial partners in China. So kind of we were looking all across the universe for funding, if that's the right way to say it. But the main thing is bringing these kind of innovative things to the market and showing that you know what you're doing. That's very helpful when you're trying to fundraising.
I have a follow-up to the funding, especially because, here we are talking to, a company that's Rapid Medical that's had their products in the field generating revenue now for a few years. So maybe you can kind of share some funding advice or experiences. And what I'm really kind of curious about too is you see a lot of companies that will go out and they'll raise hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And while it's fantastic to do that, right, it makes it, obviously it can be challenging, right? Because now you could potentially dilute, ownership. You could, potentially, if you ever want to be acquired one day, obviously now your buyout price is a lot higher because you took on all of this funding, and now do you have the sales and revenue? Did you ever kind of experience any challenges like that?
Well, of course, we experience every challenge in fundraising you can think of. Fundraising is always challenging. And, medical device, as we all know, it's maybe not the best. I think it's the most exciting field to be in, of course, but funding wise, it's challenging. We didn't raise hundreds of millions of dollars. We did raise tens of millions of dollars. Um, we did have, every time we raised money, some of our shareholders wanted us to raise less, and we wanted to raise more. It wasn't kind of 100 millions, but it's, we wanted to raise 7, and they said raise 4. And every time we kind of argued and raised 7, it turned out to be a right decision, because you don't know when bad things happen. So actually, my experience is the other way around. It's not because we didn't have the option of raising hundreds of millions, but like this downturn, we did our last round in April of 21, and there too we raise a little bit more than some of our shareholders wanted, and I'm very happy we did so, because things now are not very pleasant. So on the contrary, I think you need to take as much money as you can, but you need to be very, very careful on your spending.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
yeah.
Yeah, Ronen, really spot on, and appreciate you providing those insights. I always find it fascinating, just because it takes a lot. To your point that you were kind of touching on just a second ago in the medical device industry, to bring a technology to market, and you don't want to not have enough money, that's for sure, right?
Right.
But you need the time and the runway to generate demand for your products, to start generating revenue, and to start paying back some of that money, right? So today, where you stand, this is a bit of a personal question here, but would you say that, are you generating enough revenue where you're profitable at this point, or when do you think that would happen?
So we're not profitable yet. We're getting closer.
Yeah.
We hope to be profitable in the next 12 to 18 months if everything goes as planned.
Mm.
So we're getting closer, and now the funding, the investor environment is more appreciative of that. So it used to be all about growth. We are growing nicely, but we definitely changed our focus in the last year or two on kind of how efficient we are in our spending and things like that.
That's great. And, you were touching actually on some kind of future milestones there in that 6 to 18 months. But I would imagine too, as a company, what would be, I guess, your main focus over these 6 to 18 months? Is it in production and sales and distribution?
So we're working on a few new products. It never ends. You always want to bring new products
Okay.
to the market. I'm going back to Richard's one of his first questions about the small blood vessels in the brain. So we're running a trial, which should end early next year. And if everything goes well, we will be the first company to have an indication to treat um, ischemic strokes, which are caused by occlusions of medium-sized vessels. So everybody knows the large vessels, then there's the medium-sized vessels. So that's a new market that we hope to open. So that's kind of one of the things we're focusing on, and other things we're bringing to market. And on top of that, we are expanding our commercial footprint and things like that. So new products, of course, manufacturing comes with commercialization and commercialization.
Well, that's super exciting to hear. I think the fact that you point out innovation never rests and you do have to keep evolving. But clearly, none of this happens without a great team. And you mentioned, none of you come from a neurovascular background and you are developing this in-house. So can you talk a little bit now about how you've gone about finding the right talent, the right people to help you build this innovation?
Yeah, first of all, it took us some time. We have great people like Emily, that we know well. She does have some experience in neuro. So she is an exception. On the commercial side, we do have people with neurovascular experience, but on the kind of development R&D side, we brought people who are fresh. One of the things that I thought was a good thing we did is actually bringing younger people who have less experience and want to prove themselves is very important. Sometimes the people who have done everything and have seen everything just they try to do the same trick again and again, and these tricks maybe they worked previous time, but they're not relevant anymore. When you bring people who are fresh, they're very motivated because they want to succeed, and second, they have no kind of ties to history. They think they have a fresh kind of look at things. And going back to the question about IP and stuff like that, I think that was one of the good things we did. Of course, you need to find good people, but actually younger, or people who are relatively younger in their career, I think that was very helpful for us.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. I think everyone in the space is naturally mission driven, but I think, of course, we hear again and again about how Gen Z and younger people come with that mentality and mindset, and of course, a different perspective around solving problems. I did wonder though about the distribution side because you have all these different distributors, and we often hear that that can be a fairly risky pathway in terms of managing them. So, how have you found selecting the right people to work with who have that same passion as you for taking the product to market?
Yeah, it's not easy. And what we found is you need to work very closely with your distributor. So we like to spend a lot of time with the field, with our distributors. We really look at them as partners that we work together. You need to keep innovating. You need to share everything you have with them. And at the end of the day, it's, their success is our success. So working very closely with them, and sometimes things don't work out. And if they don't work out, you also need to make decisions. But I think we're quite lucky to have a very good kind of network of distributors. Some of them we're working together for years, and we have trust and kind of a personal relationship, which is always very important.
Yeah. I'm hearing a little bit of some reflecting here on some experiences, and we're wondering, obviously with your experience here, developing technologies, bringing them to market, continuing the innovation side while scaling your business. You've obviously been around now since 2008. Lots of advice, I'm sure, or learnings along the way. We were hoping you could share maybe some of those with our audience, especially for folks that are looking to, get into the medical device manufacturing industry, either work for an early stage company to help build a technology and product and bring it to market, or to even be the founder of a company. What kind of advice do you have for them?
Good question. I was thinking while you were speaking, there's a lot of things, I try to reflect on the things I did wrong. There's a
Mhm.
very long list, but one of the things that helped me is reading a lot. There are books that kind of really help me understand, or I think I understand kind of what I'm trying to do, and books like the Lean Startup. We talked about that before, kind of being close to the market and trying things, and the concept of MVP. It's sometimes harder in medical devices, but the fundamentals are the same. Try things, let the kind of customers tell you if what you're doing is right or not, and be close to the market. So books. So that's probably one thing.
Well, I like the business focus there, right? It's
Yeah.
not as technical as you would think. You're really the business side of things. And I think, you know, when you talk to a lot of early stage companies and founders, especially, what I always notice, and it totally makes sense, right? But they don't really focus like too much on almost like the marketing side of their business because they feel like they can't. Obviously, they can't be marketing a product or technology, but they can still be talking about what they're doing and sharing their mission, and creating awareness and generating demand that way, right? So, I think that the business side to your advice is well taken. And it's important that you don't just live in this world of developing and creating, but you have to balance it out with also kind of, sharing your mission with the world and what you're trying to do. So that makes a lot of sense.
There are business aspects that sometimes you don't think of them as a young founder. And we appreciate them a lot more when the company matures, but they are important. For example, gross margin. That's not the most interesting things people want to talk about. But if your product doesn't have a good gross margin, then it doesn't matter what you do. So, there's a rule of thumb, it needs to be at least 60%. And if you can't get there, look for something else. It could be the best product in the world. We are I think we're very fortunate going back to our manufacturing techniques. We're above 80%. We're in a very good spot, but that's one of the first things you need to look at. Everybody knows challenges of reimbursement and stuff like that, size of the market, but the business aspects are very, very important because even in medtech, people come to this business, especially investors, because they want to make money, and they invest in your company because they want to sell it for a lot of money or go public or whatever. But at the end of the day, they want a good return. And the business aspects is then it's almost the most important thing.
Yeah, that is so true. And what's coming through loud and clear is you really embedded these principles. You speak about reading and learning about these things, but again, maybe you don't know at the beginning when you start this journey where you're going to end up. But clearly you've learned along the way. You've really iterated and you've embedded some really amazing principles that any entrepreneur can take away from listening to this conversation. So thank you for sharing that. I did wonder when you're talking about investors and gross margin, it's so critical. They want to know how they're going to get their money back. So it makes me think about what lies ahead for Rapid Medical. What's the big vision 5 years down the line? Is this an acquisition opportunity, or are you looking to continue to grow the company?
We're looking to build a great company and bring value to physicians, to our customers, to patients, to our employees, and to shareholders. That's where we're looking to do. Doing that by solving great problems like we talked about, and allowing physicians to do things they cannot do without us. That's what we kind of focus on day to day. If that culminates in an acquisition or an IPO or whatever, that's not, we have to answer that question because our shareholders want to know. And when we raise money, people want to know. But actually, I don't think that's the most important question. Build the great business and then I'm sure people will want to do, buy it or do other things. That's kind of how we try to manage this, and kind of being profitable is one of our immediate goals. It will take some time, but that's kind of one of the things we're looking at.
That's great. And Ronen, since you're focused on growing this business, how do folks get in touch with you if they want to help you or join your team? Maybe what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email, LinkedIn is a little harder, but all the regular ways. I would love to leave my email to you guys, and you can share it. And love to pick up any conversation, and always enjoy talking to people.
That's
And
great.
call Emily if you need. Emily,
Yes,
contact. Yes.
absolutely. That's fantastic.
Yeah, this has been an absolute pleasure getting this chance to talk to you and hear about Rapid Medical. Of course, we are wishing you well. So thank you again, Ronen. Excited to watch the journey continue and see what happens next for Rapid Medical.
Thank you, guys. I enjoyed the conversation a lot. Appreciate the time.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to Ronen Eckhouse, CEO and co-founder of Rapid Medical. And thank you for tuning in for another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Beaglejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.